My name is Reid Schlegel, and I'm an industrial designer, and today we're going to talk about a few things you can do to take your design sketching process up a level to make it faster, cleaner, and sexier. So in industrial design sketching, you always have to think about your perspective, and whether it's 2-point or 3-point. But the most important part is thinking about what you're trying to communicate and how you're going to show that in your drawing. So 2-point perspective means that your drawing is vanishing to 2 vantage points. And if you draw something, it's going to look a little bit like this. So I've overdrawn my lines, which is okay. But you can tell these lines are eventually going to hit a vanishing point. So this is something I would usually draw if I'm trying to make a piece of architecture they're looking up at that seems a little more extreme, or maybe something that's on a counter that's a child's perspective, like a toy or a microwave. But the one I use more frequently is actually 3-point perspective, which means you still have the same 2 points going to vanishing points, but you add a third. So your vertical lines are no longer vertical, they're actually tapering towards a vanishing point. So when you draw something like this, you're actually making all of your lines go towards an imaginary vanishing point. So over time, you'll get to a place where you can just draw your lines and you can instinctually know they're going to the vanishing point, like I did here. These two are going over here, these two are coming together and going over here, and my vertical ones will be going to an imaginary vanishing point down off of the page. Which leads me to the next point. When you're actually drawing, putting your vanishing points on the page or off the page is a very important consideration. When you have your vanishing points on the page, you're going to actually have something that is going to look extreme. For example, here, if I have all of my vanishing points going to the corners of my page, it's going to make this object look extremely extreme. So it looks like something that a bird is looking at, or something that's being seen from a very far away top-down perspective. But the exact same shape, when it's drawn with the lines going off of your page, looks much more at a human scale. So I'm going to draw my lines until they actually hit the edge of the page. And you can see how this drawing feels much more of something that you'd actually touch, hold, or you'd see in real life. So just by moving your vanishing points from the page to off of the page, you can give a completely different style to your actual drawing. So something you probably noticed is that when I draw, I use a very similar base shape. My base shape is a rectangle in perspective. Now when I draw this, I try and think about how much perspective I use. This one, it's definitely a little exaggerated, but it's not too exaggerated that it feels weird. If you're drawing something that is too overly exaggerated in perspective, it's going to feel like it's from a fisheye lens, which does not feel natural and will feel a little weird when you're trying to talk to somebody who's not a designer. On the other hand, if you draw something that is too close to being parallel, it actually makes it feel weird too. These lines are technically in perspective, but the vanishing point is so far away that it makes them feel parallel, which makes it feel wrong. So always think about where you are in the process and what type of perspective you want. If you are in the middle of the process, I usually use something like this, where it's a little more exaggerated, but still feels like it's real. And then later on, I'll use something in between these two that gets a little tighter, a little closer to reality, and makes it really feel like the object is real, so that way you can really have a conversation about the actual details and not about the overall concept. But when drawing in perspective, always want to keep these things in mind. Because when you have your base shape down, it makes it really easy for you to just build off of it. If you look at anything, all objects are basically shapes. You can take a printer, a table, a car, and break it down to spheres, cylinders, and cubes. So for example, with that exact same rectangle that I kind of default to, you can take this and start building off of it in perspective to make anything. So for example, if I want to take this shape and make a printer, I would think about all of the tools and rules of perspective and apply them to start building shapes. So by building down, I have a big, basically brick. And then by building up and over, I can start adding details like an extended top area. where maybe you have the controls or you actually feed the paper. But for this one, I'm going to actually have that be the control area. And then here you can start adding other details like a printer bed that actually adds the paper, the place where the actual paper comes out, and so on. So obviously this is the very beginning of a sketch, but by using perspective and building on it, you can make anything and make it pretty realistic and also decide how exaggerated or realistic you want it to be.